Well, welcome. I'm the Crazy Corpsman, Robert Johnson here. I guess on Twitter I'm Wasp Society, and that's a big joke because somebody was like trying to use wasp as a slur, and I was like, well, then heck yeah, I'm a wasp, so I own that stuff. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I'm here, and I have my friend Chaz here. So I'm gonna go let him introduce himself, and then we'll get right into it. But tonight, what we're going to be going over is Harlan, Cleveland, and the U of M. And then with that, like, I'm going to jump right into one Minnesota. The Horizons program's been around a while, but you're going to see why it's important, especially after what we went over last week. Go ahead, Chaz.
Oh no, man. I mean, they hear from me Monday through Friday, 9 to 11. So you know what I'm saying? Like I'm on here to educate so we can able to liberate and make a change in Minnesota because honestly, man, I'm tired of the way that it's been going. And I came out of the house because I wanted to make a difference on May 20th, when George Floyd was killed. And I just don't like the way that Minnesota is going, and I feel kind of bamboozled and not just by like one side, but like both because I kind of felt like fighting, and that's why like I look at TC, somebody they made a fake profile of Todd Pearson, right? And I messaged him, I was like, yo, is this you? I got a friend request or whatever, and he was like, no, no, and I was like, well, that's what they do. This is one of their tactics is to make fake profiles or whatever, but it's like crazy because I was on one side and all these people that, I felt like I disliked because, I was being taught something because of what these people were saying. And that's not like until I started having conversations with individuals and started to learn and educate myself that I noticed that it was a narrative, it was a rhetoric. And once you get to talk to individuals, you get to see that it's not so much. I mean, there is racism. I'm not saying that there isn't, but when it comes to like in the community and trying to make a difference, it's more about classism and are you doing the right thing? Because even though we're told that it's right, it doesn't mean that it is right. It's just that there's so many people vocally stating that it's right. It just makes it seem right. So, like I said, I talk about this Monday through Friday. Robert's been on the show plenty times. What's crazy? I was going through the
How do they
episodes.
find you? Can you let them know like where do they find
Oh
you?
yeah,
Like,
yep. I'm on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and you can find me. And I'll put a link up here too. When the video is playing, is that you can find me at the Urban Conservative. I'm on Spotify. That's all you gotta do is Google me. I used to hate when people used to Google me because you find out bogus stuff, but now it's all very things that I'm very proud of. Not saying that because I'm not really proud of my criminal stuff, but you know what I'm saying. But
everything
that's
makes
my
you who you are, dude. Like, it's
right,
not
right.
like, you know.
I used to be ashamed of it, but now I wear it like people look at me weird, but I literally wear it like a sleeve, a badge on my sleeve because that's who it makes me who I am. If I didn't learn, the lessons of what I was doing wrong, and I wanted to blame everybody else but Chaz. You know what I'm saying? It was easy to blame the system. It was easy to blame um, my mom, you know what I'm saying, my parents, and just everybody but Chaz. And once I got to understand of like, yes, I can blame the system, but it was my choice because I had two choices. I could either face everything and rise, or I could forget it and run. And usually I was forget it and run, you know. And when I decided to um, face it and rise, is when I really started to see is that a lot of individuals only liked me is because I was forgetting about it and running. So um, I'm proud of who I am today, and I wouldn't change it for the world. None of my kids, none of the experiences that I've been through, I wouldn't change it because it made me who I am today. And it kind of saddens me because they only take a certain few out of our communities and they spotlight that black excellence or that Hispanic excellence, but yet you have people in your communities that are stars, but yet they're not nobody listens to them because at the end of the day, you have gatekeepers that downplay them or because they have the clout and the fame and the followers.
Definitely. I plan on getting into more like into detail about the history on some of this stuff. But today I wanted to give like a brief overview and then like especially of Harlan Cleveland, a couple of things he was involved with, and then the setup of not just the world economy, but also Minnesota's economy
Right.
and like how we got here. So like we're gonna be listening to some videos from or not videos, some audio. They don't the legislative stuff, I guess they took down from the archives of stuff. I don't know why. Maybe because Minnesota's been going on a heck of a lot longer than walls.
Right.
And we'll be able to see that. But I didn't realize who Harlan Cleveland was until recently. And if people don't know, that's a really key name that's been involved in a lot of stuff in U.S. history that is very key to where we're at today. So I wanted to make sure you were able to introduce yourself. DJB Lethal and Peggy have been invited to join us tonight too. I only have a certain amount of seats because I haven't paid for the premium
Right.
yet. So, but
Man, we can use mine. You know what I'm saying? We might have to, we'll end it. We can have to end it or whatever, but we could literally use mine. And I think I have more than, I don't know how many seats I have, but um, I think it's like up to, I think this one is up to like 10, isn't it?
it's up to six. I I only know how to do so much, and I'm not able. I'm not going to be able to switch through everybody if it's more than six.
Right. No, you're good. You're
We need
good.
a co-host at that point, which then you
Right.
have to pay for.
It's
So
good. Mm-mm.
okay, so Harlan Cleveland. If people don't know who he was a gentleman that grew up in Wisconsin, and he's a Rhodes Scholar, all this stuff, right? But he ended up being a professor at the University of Minnesota and involved with the Humphrey School of Public Affairs. Okay, he went on to found the Aspen Institute, which has been huge at working behind the scenes and gathering in nonprofits and NGOs to basically decide what the future of the world and the US is going to be. So we're talking about like mega globalism, almost like the UN type of stuff. And they actually do have a lot of members from the UN come and speak. Well, Harlan Cleveland, after World War II, was one of the guys that actually helped found the UN. Like when I say that, not like their main body, but he was in charge of like organizing it in Europe and then organizing some of the NATO stuff and then the nuclear non-proliferation stuff. Well, come to find out, he also was involved with some weather modification stuff and overseeing that because he present that stuff to the UN. And it's called World Weather Systems. If you look that up, it's in the CIA documents. It's in congressional documents. So yeah, they're able to manipulate the weather. Okay, there's a global program for that. Um, and then you get into his involvement in Vietnam in the Far East, University of Honolulu, the East-West portion, which Obama's mom went to, and Obama's father or the guy that Obama's mom married um, to go to Indonesia was involved with one of the oil companies. Okay, so like we're talking about CIA stuff because like Obama ended up working for Orville Freeman from Minnesota, and was it Business International Corporation, which was a known CIA front. You have Orville Freeman was a CIA front. He did a lot with Russia, with food under both LBJ and then before that, Harlan Cleveland worked for both JFK and LBJ. But I don't remember for Orville if he did both. I know LBJ, his best buddy Hubert Humphrey, wasn't VP till then, and Humphrey had actually lamented right before that when he ran against JFK that he'd have to be VP before he could be president. And they both were heavily involved with the mob. William O. Douglas was involved with the mob. He's a Supreme Court justice from Minnesota who's on the board for the Flamingo Hotels nonprofit that they ran. And so these people are involved with the mob and the CIA. And oh, by the way, they're communists. I found out Frank Oppenheimer, we talked about him last week. His brother was Robert Oppenheimer. And so he worked with his brother, Robert Oppenheimer, on the nuke stuff. Guy was an avowed communist trying to give this to other countries as well.
Hold on a minute.
Got kicked out of the U.
That there's a movie out called Oppenheimer.
Yeah, it's that guy's brother, man. He was the commie that got kicked out of the U of M.
Right. And it's easier when people, because in my eyes, they kind of program us to already the stuff that is going on. So it's no coincidence that they have a movie about a guy that literally makes stuff that, happen in the world. And then they put a different kind of narrative on it while other stuff goes on.
Oh, definitely. And so like NATO also helped stage the stay behind crew with the Nazis in that. So they had fascists that were against communism, but then they also, with the UN and that, they actually did support communists quite literally, and globalization. Okay, because after World War II, you have to realize that the economy before World War II, we were in the Great Depression. All that mass production is what gave us the economy during World War II. If that mass production ended, they were looking at possibly another global recession, right? Another depression, Great Depression. And so with that mass production, you needed somebody to consume it. So we exported a lot all over the globe. Almost every U.S. interdiction ended up with a deep water port, and we shipped in there. Well, in a lot of those places, you look at it, we also then afterwards, Malaysia, China, Japan, South Korea, India, we ended up exploiting the cheap labor and shipping our jobs over there eventually. Okay. And that'll be key when it gets to the point in the conference when they're talking about the global economy and everything. Okay. So one of the things that I know me and Chaz have talked about is that instead of building up the U.S. citizens, they imported all these workers, okay? And they had the ability to build up U.S. citizens. Why didn't they? What we're going to prove here is we're going to prove not only did they know, but they planned it, and they chose exactly who was going to benefit with what they were doing and who was going to be left behind. And this does tie into diversity, equity, and exclusion. And yes, I said that appropriately. Diversity, equity, and exclusion. Because in order to have the inclusion part, you are also excluding others. Okay, because if you have 50 marbles and you're including some, you're also by definition excluding some. And so in that, who has been excluded and who is used to push DEI. And I think we're going to come down to the reality of it and what the politicians have been pushing. But not only that, the undue influence of NGOs, nonprofits, and think tanks in our government, because a few organizations and a few people have shaped key history, and we need to realize that if we want to know where we're going, you got to know where you've been. And some of their advice is good, and some of it is bad. If we just listen to it, we're going to break it down a little bit. So I'm not sure how much we're going to get to. This week I've listened to about 6 hours. We're not doing that all tonight. We're going to see how far we get tonight, and then we'll continue. So before I hop into that, I want to see if Chaz has anything else to say before we listen to the audio.
We can get right into the audio. I ain't got it. I'm excited about this. Go ahead.
Yeah, so like I got the receipts.
All right. No, I'm fine with this.
Okay, so this is the one Minnesota.
That 20,
Can you
that
mute?
one you sent me,
What's up?
that one you sent me in our chat.
Yeah. So can you mute your mic if you're not speaking? Sorry. I don't know why I'm getting feedback if it's on my end or your end. So this right here is from '07. And I'm just going to go down and see if we can see the history. Yeah. So here's the history. The Horizons is what started in the '70s, right? And then you have one Minnesota that started in 2007. And that was because it was the age of globalism. Now we went from the age of industrialization to the age of globalism. And they even talk about it. So we're just going to go ahead and get right in to the audio. We're going to skip the introduction and the program overview. And we're just going to get right into the audio here.
Board of Advisory. Mr. Sankler received his bachelor's degree in mathematics and statistics from the University of Minnesota Duluth, and in 2003 was inducted into the UMD Academy of Science and Engineering. So without further ado, Peter, thank you for joining us here in Minnesota today, and thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
All right.
I have a problem, which is that my voice is really in bad shape. This has never happened to me before, but I'm going to have to speak in a very conversational tone and hope that I can get through this. So whoever's running the mic, make sure that it's loud enough. I am not an economist. I'm not a social scientist. What you're going to hear is the musings of a journalist who has watched government for 35 years at all levels. And I need to take full advantage of my journalistic license to be very broad and superficial. The current word that sticks in my mind as best describing trends we're seeing in the world now is unsustainable. It is used repeatedly by economists in their analysis of what they see as significant imbalances in the world economy. What's going now, they are all saying, cannot continue. It is used repeatedly by people I know in government, like Mike Leavitt, the former Utah governor, and now HHS secretary, who I think is one of the more thoughtful politicians I've ever met. And he uses it to describe the federal government and the states, what they face in paying the expanding bills for Medicare, Medicaid, and so on, as well as Social Security. It is used repeatedly by planners and environmentalists in describing how we are expanding and developing our land and our natural resources. And it's used repeatedly by those who study trends in our energy production and consumption. What am I talking about? Take economic imbalances like our federal trade deficit. We're gorging on imports while other countries like China and Japan and Germany are too dependent on exports and racking up record surpluses. Our current accounts deficit this past year was almost $900 billion.
I'm going to pause that right there because I think that it's key that we listen to what Trump's saying right now about the trade imbalances and deficits. I don't like Trump on everything, okay? But this is key.
We need to export more, and they need to consume more. China, in particular, has been investing most of its trillion-dollar surplus in dollar-denominated U.S. stocks and government and corporate bonds. So far, it has worked, but the dollar now is falling, and if and when there is a weakening in the markets, it is likely to fall further, testing the patience of those holding these U.S. investments. Take income, and there's good news there. Our exports are beginning to go up a little bit, and Asian consumption is beginning to go up a little bit.
And I just want to remind people, this is right before the 2008 crash in the stock market. Okay, so that timing right there is very, very key to what he's saying.
Take income inequality, which is a growing trend both here in this country and in the world at large, as income inequality has reached near record levels in many countries. The distribution of the world's wealth has become more concentrated. By 2000, which is the last year for which they have world numbers, the top 1% of the world's population, that's some 37 million people, with a net worth of a little over $500,000, accounted for about 40% of the world's total net worth. That's the top 1%, 37 million people in a world with, 6 billion people, accounting for 40% of total net worth. The bottom half of the world's population owned only 1% of total assets. Developing countries are not developing fast enough, while rich countries, particularly the U.S., have seen faster growth and a spectacular buildup of assets, with the notable exceptions of China and India. The third world is drifting behind. Remember, that data is 6 years old, and some of the greatest growth in China and India have occurred since then. Americans have amassed much of the world's treasure. In 2000, the U.S. accounted for 4.7% of the world's population, but almost one-third of all net worth. Nearly 40% of those people in the 37 million, the wealthiest 1%, are Americans. Take population growth. Knowledgeable people will argue about how many people is enough in this country. We just passed the 300 million milestone, only 4 decades after hitting 200 million, and almost a century after hitting 100 million. The census projects that by 2050, we'll be at 420 million people, or an increase of 40%. The United States now is virtually the only advanced country in the world significantly increasing its population. The two main reasons, of course, are aging and immigration. Immigration being figured, and I think rather conservatively, at about 1 million people a year.
That is definitely a place I'm going to pause it real quick.
Yep.
And I'm going to bring me and Chaz back up. Give me 1 second. Switch screen. Okay, I'm going to put my video back on. And so that's key already, what he said right there. Do you want me to go back 30 seconds on the audio and replay that?
Yeah. This ain't no professionals over here. We all just work. When you know better, we do better. So be patient. I know it happens on mine till the video be lagging, and that's the thing with Wi-Fi, internet connection. But it's crazy how most of the problems that we're facing, they've already been discussing, and
They knew about it. So they knew about the population cliff happening. So if you think about it, no offense to anybody, the baby boom generation, they had so much wealth, and what happened? Consumerism. Okay?
right.
Because who built them up is the Depression generation, right? Our great grandmas and grandpas that were saving like tinfoil to reuse. You know what I mean?
Right. No, and
And
that's what it definitely, because as you can see, as the generations have gone through time and the eras or whatever, it seems like we get less of self-responsibility and accountability, because it's like we have so much enablers around us, like, the sayings of what happens in the house stays in the house, or and that's why you see all these weird ass Uncle Larrys running around the community and nobody wants to say nothing. But I
Next
just
sentence, couple sentences that he's gonna do is key though. So I'm gonna mute myself and hit play for just like 30, 40 seconds, and we can discuss that portion. Okay, so in a global economy, that's the problem. Is like, what are they seeking? Okay, they're seeking low wage, low skill workers, and they're doing that through importation. Okay, rather than number one, continuing to build up those that are here, because people remember back when their grandpas or their uncles or whatever used to be able to work at a factory job and be able to own a house and a car. Okay, but what happened to that? Well, we demanded more cheap stuff, which that'll be getting into the next few audio clips. So I'm not going to spoil that part of it, but it just gets interesting to see how did they decide to solve it. It was obviously since the 80s 90s was through immigration. So then what happens when you have people that were promised certain things and had certain opportunities that they thought they had that then no longer have those opportunities because they were shipped overseas or you're flooding in immigrants. A lot of those entry level jobs used to go to high schoolers and that. And the second part about that is how do you make native citizens want to have more kids is one of the biggest factors of that is being able to afford a house. Okay. The cost of living. Because when people can afford to live, they usually have more kids. Now, that only works up to a certain level because also once you get past a certain economic point, you tend to have less kids too. Um, but that's just interesting. I just want to get your thoughts on that, Chaz.
no, because to me, it's like you have to go back and explain to people like sometimes of how what they're seeing today and explain it to them because it like once you go and especially for me as the more I've gone and learned the the history, the research, and everything about because we got here for some reason. It wasn't like nobody just came up with it and like uh, we just planned it. You know what I'm saying? It had to be years in the making. So as I started going through, links that you've given me or like Kent login, and it started to all make sense because America had it a foundation, Minnesota had it a foundation, right? So we had to look into like I just seen what this that they had in the year 2007 was a 2020 committee, and they're talking about something that's in advance, and we're like, okay, wait, because now you're seeing plans like the 2025, like 2030, 2040, and you're like, wait, so if all this is designed, why aren't people picking up a book instead of going to be at empty yelling at empty buildings?
Well, in this right here, this was presented to our legislator. These are guys guiding our legislature.
That's when one
Okay.
Representative Margaret Anderson Keller, she works for the city of Minneapolis. And I know that because I've been to city council meetings and have met Margaret. And it's like, yeah, how don't people know these connections? And it's like that's one thing that I can always say about some of the people that I truly love and respect is they've always told me, follow the money, Chaz. I'm not going to give you my opinion because it's there on paper. You go get the truth for yourself. And that's the way it is. Like, that's why I've always said documentation over conversation.
People consider me a conspiracy theorist, but like, dude, hey, I'm saying I went and I've listened to hours of economists. I've listened to these presentations given to these people. They're
Right.
saying there's a plan. They're saying they're having conferences planning. So for me to say they did that is a conspiracy, but so I'm just presenting the facts. This is exactly how they've done it, and this is what they've done.
And you know the crazy thing of why they call you a conspiracy theorist is because the average Joe doesn't know about if it's not in your face or you're never hearing about it, you don't know about it. So the just like we talked about before we got live is that maybe we were live or whatever, but like there used to be video of this. Now it's just archived as audio. So what does that tell you? It's like you don't even know if this is like really the whole audio. And now did they edit parts that they didn't want people to like, man, we know what's out here, and people are doing their research, their homework, and because people think that it's a person, it's a system.
I think that they're too stupid to actually do that, and I'm not saying that in a bad way, but like I've come across top secret sensitive documents that are being put out for requests for qualifications, and I've posted them places warning the FBI and CIA that they're doing it, and in the military too, and trying to get people to show up at my door to talk to me because we shouldn't be leaking government secrets. So they are
Right.
obviously doing it on purpose and know that people have access to it. I'm talking about like specs for like drones and some of the weird stuff and like I mean, hey, dude, cool. Like, you want the bad guys to get it, and you're literally putting out in your request for like qualifications for work.
Still think
Um, but
they
like,
designed it
yeah, I'm
that way.
not. What's up?
They designed it that way. That's what I feel like. There isn't no whistleblowers or I mean there is, but I mean I feel like it's designed that way because people can only put up with so much for so long without the truth getting to the light. You can only hide it for so long. And you can only call people conspiracy theorists for so long. I mean, look at what's happening in America today. In 2020, you couldn't tell nobody that COVID was made in a lab. They would call you a conspiracy theorist. 2025, they call you the truth. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
They're
you
still
got
not
to be
addressing Minnesota's involvement with that, and they say that as a possible CIA agent involved was that Fang Lee from the University of Minnesota, huh, Walls? I sent you emails on it. That the university president, vice president of research, had to email me back, being like, "But we follow the law." That's basically what they sent me back.
right.
I mean, I'm obviously not an idiot if they're having to respond like that, and they're actually having to respond to me you know but it's all good. So with this though, with the globalization and all that, you got to realize too, in 79 is when the big push for immigration to Minnesota started. And in the 80s there's a lot of people actually moving up here from other places in the US, like Chicago and down south as well. And they used the Black Nation of Islam to set it up for the Somalis, which then they started in 88. And all this has been CIA ops. BCCI switched over from the what they were doing in actual banks to the Hawala money transfer system, which I've been posting on next. We'll get into all this portion of it next week or in the following weeks. I'm not saying that each individual that came up here was a CIA op. I'm saying the CIA purposely seeded certain things because they knew what was coming. You know what I mean? Because they also targeted the black communities for drugs since Operation Underworld. That hasn't stopped. Uh, some of the Hmong people that came over here were literally CIA warriors in the previous warfares. Same thing with the people from Somalia. So to say that the Hawala money system wasn't part of the CIA op, it still is, and it's obvious. And so the CIA does have their hand in who's coming here. So it's not just about the refugees. I'm not saying I want Somalians to die. What I'm saying is I want your country to be good, and the U.S. needs to stop screwing up your economy and your country so that way you can decide what's good for you on your own without having to come here. That's what I want, you know.
No, I get it. I get it. That's what me and my mom was talking about. Like, I really didn't notice a big African, like Somalian, Ethiopians, because when I went to high school and middle school, there was like we see Native Americans, we see some Asians, but that was because we understood we had wars going on in Vietnam, and then as soon as Desert Storm was happening, and the late '90s is I wouldn't say late
Black
like
Hawk Down.
Right. You were starting to see this Somalians, Ethiopians, Nigerians. So then we started seeing them little cliques of Somalian GDs or Ethiopian Crips, Nigerian Bloods. And I'm just over here thinking, like, damn, y'all didn't have it in Africa, did y'all? Y'all was gang, you know what I'm saying? We had GD folks, you know what I'm saying? I'm like, damn, we was always in Somalia.
People
But
are tribal. That's what
right,
that gets down to, is people are tribal. Like, and that's because like we want to feel accepted into a group.
right.
Okay. And so how we define those groups is different. And you want a really good example of this is football teams, or I don't know, go to any concert. You have people that really love or hate certain artists. At a music festival, you have people that really love or hate certain teams. People will riot after their team either wins, even if the team wins, they riot, or their team loses, they riot. Um, and there's a lot of money and emotion involved with that too. It's the same thing with anything. Anything can be made into that cult-like following. Do you drink Pepsi or do you drink Coke? Do you drink Dr. Pepper or do you drink Barks Root Beer or A&W? Right? You go down the list on that. Do you prefer Nike, Adidas? Do you prefer Taylor Swift, or what's another, Katy Perry, right? I don't know, Miley Cyrus. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm saying, like, you can pit everybody against each other though and divide each other. But we're gonna hop back into the audio. I'm gonna let Chaz, if he has any comments to what I just said, and then we'll hop back into the audio.
Go on, get into the video, the audio. You can get back to the audio, man.
Can you hear the audio when I play it?
No, I can't hear the audio.
Let me put it back up then.
Aside from the immigration question, and I think rather conservatively at about 1 million people a year, there are obvious benefits. A highly diverse country probably is better prepared to compete in the globalized economy than one where everyone is pretty much the same. But most observers would agree that our immigration policy has been careless and haphazard, not guided by any particular strategy other than turning our heads the other way when we are seeking low-wage, low-skill workers. And that's pretty much what we are getting at the moment. The hope, of course, is that these new immigrants will give the economy vitality just at the time we need heavy public revenues to cover soaring Social Security, pension, and health care costs. We sure have a stake in making sure these immigrants are able to pick up the tab and are willing to pay it. Aside from the immigration question, there are concerns about what another 100 million people or so will mean in terms of quality of life, density, and air and water pollution, preservation of farmland and open space. We're already experiencing significant problems with water in the fast-growing Southwest and other places. We're increasingly aware that we have to both develop more energy and conserve it. But when population increases at a rate that it is now, it means that there are more homes to heat and cool, more cars on the road, and so on. So even if we're very successful in finding alternative sources, in conserving and producing energy, we may still find ourselves in an unsustainable situation. Unless we show some foresight about these larger economic and demographic issues, it's going to be harder to remain competitive in the world economy while maintaining our historic standard of living. True, these are not, by and large, issues over which states exert much control, but they do form the backdrop, the context, in which states are going to have to operate in coming years. So what are the areas where states can take control, where governors, state legislatures, and managers, along with their colleagues at the local level, and I would underline that, can move the trend lines from unsustainability to what is clearly a more competitive position. I think there are 6 or 7 that seem to predominate, many of them very much interrelated. The first one is really, you can repeat it again and again, is education, physical infrastructure, healthcare, tax systems, public management, and then what I call quality of life, environment, arts, and amenities. And finally, I throw one in called the state of our culture. Education, obviously, is number one, and I think high-quality preschool education is the one that is the area where most people and states are extremely interested now, because of the data showing that if you do it well, you eliminate lots of problems down the road. But then there's K through 12, higher education through graduate programs, and I think it's an area we've been ignoring at our own peril in the last decade. Adult education and retraining, remedial programs for those left behind, everything that contributes to the betterment of our workforce. The emphasis in each state might be different depending on the economy of that state. We have to make sure we're funding every level adequately, but also that we're getting a sufficient return. We have to ask ourselves why we're paying as much or more to educate our population than most advanced countries, yet achieving poorer results than many. We have to ask why kids seem to be worse off in writing, in math, and in science. Yet clearly, and we're accentuating those now, but clearly we're ignoring history, geography, civics, particularly civics. And then there's no time for PE or for the arts and music. We have to ask why business is having to do so much remedial training of employees just to bring them up to standard, and that they expected public education would provide. My wife and I were driving along the other day and listened to on National Public Radio to a story out of a Baltimore high school that was chilling. And it was about a principal who was handing out awards to faculty of this high school in inner city Baltimore. What for? For showing up for work. The truancy rate among faculty had been so high that they were now offering awards to people for attending school. And it obviously, the problem got deeper. This faculty was deeply demoralized because of the pupils they were having to handle and what was being asked of them, and what they were doing was just having a lot of sick-out days. It was a very upsetting story in some ways, and yet you could tell in the interviews with this teacher, you really felt for her because the problems were so dismal in this school, because this faculty was so downtrodden. And she had been able to achieve enormous results by this little program trying to raise their morale and so on. Boy, you know, when that's what's going on in our inner city schools, we've got a real problem. Infrastructure. It's getting a lot harder to move around. We're wasting much more time in traffic. Use of mass transit and walking are falling as a percentage of commuting. Larger percentages of people are driving alone to work than just 25 years ago. And we're now wasting 2 billion gallons of gas in traffic jams a year, a number that keeps on growing. It's harder to meet the needs of everyday commerce. This clearly is unsustainable and unproductive. The estimates in some states of the cost to simply catch up with the required maintenance of what we already have in states like Pennsylvania and Colorado, Massachusetts, California, Indiana are prodigious. Along with the drop in funding of its state university system, poor road maintenance had a lot to do with the vote in Colorado, led by the conservative governor who had passed it, of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. It has to do with why Mitch Daniels, the governor of Indiana, and Richie Daley in Chicago are essentially selling off infrastructure to private companies to operate and maintain them, providing those jurisdictions with much-needed cash to meet other maintenance needs. It's why Ed Rendell of Pennsylvania is asking the financial community to come up with some buyers for the Pennsylvania Turnpike. And John Corzine, past head of Goldman Sachs, is doing an inventory of all the infrastructure in New Jersey to decide what can be long-term leased to other companies to provide the state with the money it needs to handle its own infrastructure. It's why Arnold Schwarzenegger successfully got the voters to agree to borrow $37 billion to meet the needs of his state's infrastructure. Healthcare. Almost no one is happy about how our healthcare system is working now. In a nutshell, just like in education, we're spending more than anyone else except maybe Switzerland, and are way down in the list of outcomes. So it's another bang for the buck dilemma that we got to solve. It clearly is not sustainable the way it's going now. It is inefficient, and it is a serious drag on our company. And if you don't believe that, ask the CEOs in our auto industry or anyone else who is trying to compete on a worldwide basis. The number of uninsured is rising again, and the states will likely to continue to peck away at the problem in the wake of the passage of the compulsory plan in Massachusetts. But there's a lot more at stake here. States will have to continue making progress in reducing Medicaid costs, and at what price to Medicaid recipients, I can't tell you. But if they're going to have to do that, if they're going to remain fiscally healthy, because the growth in that program is now crowding out education and infrastructure, which are the key components of a competitiveness strategy. This state, and California, and Maryland, New York, Missouri, and a number of other states are candidates to take action this year. On our website this morning, I saw a story that Arnold Schwarzenegger, speaking from a bed because he can't walk because of his ski accident, is proposing the most ambitious state healthcare program in the country, $12 billion initially, in a plan that sounds like it's based off of the Massachusetts plan. Critics are already saying he's underfunding it. But Arnold is not a guy who seems to think in small ideas. My guess is that we will continue inching ever closer to some form of universal health care using very different models in different states. Tax.
I'm just going to pause it right there for 1 second. Because we didn't do that. Instead, we hopped into universal health care and universal models for like the entire country. And I just don't think that was necessarily a good idea, because then not everything works the same in each area of the country. Oh, there we go. Do you have anything to say on that?
No, I think the oddity, what you're playing is definitely getting into the point of like you're seeing we have all these issues today, and they were basically preparing, kind of preparing for talking about it in 13 years prior, before COVID even hit. They were building up for, you know, whatever you want to call this, mass migrants. They tell us that if they're immigrants, um, and that there's Office of New Americans, there's, all these various other things, but yet all this money, and yet nowhere ever gets better, it gets worse. I don't see any communities except stakeholder communities get better and prosper, but the communities that are marginalized and don't have a lot of stakeholders in them, they don't really care about. People are boycotting Target, but nobody wants to talk about the Dark Money Alliance. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't want to talk about the Minneapolis 100. So unless you want to talk about those conversations, I could care less that Target got rid of some DEI, because they've already had history. And if people weren't doing their research and, learning up their homework about, what media was going to get out there to feed you a narrative, well, yeah, you had to see where. That's why I say, when I listen to people, when they say follow the money, I see what they're talking about, because most of the media stations that were out there, well, whether they want to call themselves independent or not, has gotten contracts, grants from, let's say, Minneapolis Foundation, or, they've gotten grants from the city of Minneapolis, or, or the Wilder Foundation. And it's like, come on, even with the Sanhan Journal, I had the owner, Muhammad, I believe his name was, um, in my, inbox. I messaged him. I'm like, you can't call yourself an independent newspaper, a free thinking newspaper, if you're talking about feeding our future, but there's certain names you won't go after. But then I understand why, because you got a grant from the city of Minneapolis. So you want to keep on getting money. So you're not going to go as hard on, that Mayor Frey is possibly connected, or Jamal Osman or Omar Fatih. But you'll talk about Sharon Ross or Abdi Noor, people that really don't have no stature, because you talked about, I think I just said his name, Abdi Noor, is he was a Mayor Frey's policy aide. He worked in his office. So you mean to tell me that there was no connection of, him going in there and saying, hey, we got millions and millions of dollars in contracts, and we'll give you some little kickback if you go talk to MDE, because the more politicians we get, like Jamal Osman or Omar Fatih, you got a state senator, a city council member, and then you have a big time mayor coming in going to bat. And feeding our future was a scam. They said they were feeding kids, and especially one like think it was called the Rainforest, or it was called a cafe. But they said he was feeding almost 1.7 million kids a week. And it's like, yo, there's not even 1.7 million kids in a certain area. You know what I'm saying? So like, who are you feeding? But then the money was going to other countries for properties, or they were buying properties here. They were going on vacations. They were buying. I mean, it was ridiculous, and it was sad, because the programs that were supposed to help us were actually fraudulent. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of disheartening and discouraging a little bit of programs that are supposed to better you were actually making it worse for you.
Oh, definitely. And so like the stuff that he's explaining is very key, because actually on it'll probably be 2 to 3 weeks before we get to Sandra Vargas. And Sandra Vargas was at that time of the Minneapolis Foundation. Okay. Now she runs Minnesota's Council on Foundations. Okay. So that one Minnesota lady from 08 who ran Minneapolis Foundation now runs the Council on Foundations of Minnesota. And once we get to that point, we will definitely show the list of foundations, charities, trusts, all these things, because it's like a lot of them. And I'm not saying they're all bad, but we're going to see where this undue influence comes. Because if these are the people that are presenting to your legislator, and your legislator is not able to hear from you as an individual, that's key. You need to get up off your rear end, get a group of your friends together, and go talk to your legislator. Because otherwise, guess what? Minneapolis Foundation will do it for you. The Hubert Humphrey School will do it for you. Bobby Joe, he'll do it for you. So you better be able to get a group together and actually go take a day off and meet with them. Sit down and have coffee with them. You know, see what's up. Because if they don't hear from you, and don't just go in there screaming and yelling at them with a bullhorn. These are real issues, okay? If my community is not being taken care of and we're Americans, how come we've been able to subsidize all these free programs for the refugees and immigrants when you haven't given those same opportunities? So instead of saying, hey, we want to be treated any different, just say, hey, before we give it to the refugees, can our community get the same sort of treatment? And because that's equal treatment. I thought that was sort of constitutional.
That's what I was going to
Program's
say.
unconstitutional, or you're afraid to apply it equally, you know? And that's where, again, the diversity, equity, and exclusion, because they use the DEI stuff to push the refugees and immigrants over the natives. I mean, and when I say native minority populations, I'm talking about Native Americans. I'm talking about the Spanish that were here when the U.S. gained that territory. I'm talking about the blacks too. Yes, Okay, so if we're importing all these people, which Pan-Africanism did help with, okay, um, then you're literally replacing yourself without yourself having the opportunity. What they're talking about in there is building up the education and everything for these groups. They're doing it for everybody but you, because your leaders are also involved with it, and they're also getting the slick hand Willie out the back, like McAfee, like a lot of them. I'm not saying all of them. There are some good ones, just like there's good people in every group. But you know what? There's a lot of people also within your own communities that are getting the money and getting paid and being the advocates to tell the government what they want to hear about you,
Right.
so that way you don't have a say.
No, and that's the crazy part is you look at these people's on their 990 forms, they got transportation budgets, they have, housing budgets, and you're like, okay, so we're paying for your housing, we're paying for your car note, and we're paying your salary. What are you doing for the community? How much of that money, you got $100,000 grant, but only 10% of that is going to hit the streets. That's not smart. That's not very cost efficient because we're just fueling a bigger issue and we're not even touching the core,
And you can
and
go look at your own cities and look at the foundation. Look up your city and foundation, okay, or your region and foundation, and you'll be really interested to find those things. Because remember the Rockefellers, just as they were setting up the income taxes and that, all these, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, you go down the list, okay, all these foundations, the Bush Foundation. I'm not talking about George, I'm talking about the Minnesota Bush. McKnight was tied to, I think, Cargill or
yeah,
3M, I forget
Cargill,
which one.
they're
And
still
you go down the list, but then these people also have these hedge funds, and some of these hedge funds are actually the state retirement programs invest in them, and it's just a big like conglomerate on that side of it too. So there's a lot of undue influence, because some of these people are literally then donating to politicians the money that they're getting paid for running the state's programs. And when I say that, there's literally like the Wayzata people that I sent you, literally that were running a hedge fund for retirements for Minnesota,
right.
and they got busted in 2014. Sorry, 2024. It was an earlier donation, I think, from the 22 run.
Well, look, the crazy, excuse
What's
me,
that?
but the crazy thing of it, there was an interview that U.S. Attorney Joe Thompson, I believe his name is, and he kind of basically stated that out is that it was a kickback program to keep on doing what people were allowing to do, and I say that is because they were writing legislation with loopholes to be able to do what they do and to make it legal. So just because they write something and say that it's right doesn't make it's right. Just because you got a million people standing over there and there's only me and Robert over here standing, well, it's wrong. You know what I'm saying? So just because I don't understand that. It's you have so many individuals out here that steer people wrong, and all it takes is a quick Google search, or all it takes is, then I understand it, is because our public education system was built on workers, not thinkers. So then I understand it. Is like as soon as you get past talking to somebody and you want to go into history, they're not interested in it because they don't understand it.
With that, we're going to hop back into the audio. So let me
Tax systems. Many of our state tax systems are imbalanced and, to say the least, very dated. There finally may be change coming, but I'll believe it when I see the legislation pass. The immediate catalyst is sticker shock from property tax bills because of soaring assessments. But many economists and good government types sense an opportunity here to accomplish what they have been advocating for years, aligning tax codes more closely with how and where the economy has been growing, to the professions, to the services, to the knowledge economy, the information economy, and away from the taxation of the manufacture of goods and the ownership of property. The best example here is Boeing and Microsoft, next-door neighbors. Boeing, a much smaller company in market cap, paying a much larger share of its income to King County and Washington State than Microsoft because of the way we tax. If we don't start rewriting tax codes, modernizing them, then I think the pressure will continually be there to just keep raising taxes on the same people we're already taxing. Public management. I do believe that government sets the bar too low and that we are too protective of the status quo. I do not believe that government should be managed like a business, as so many people say. Governments are not expected to make a profit. They are expected to deliver all kinds of services to a wide range of constituents, and the most needy are the least able to pay. This is not a great business model. They are expected to operate in the open. They are expected to share all trade secrets. They have far less leeway with their employees. But that is not to say that they cannot operate in a more business-like manner. I believe we have been far too accepting of the culture of fragmentation in our entire governmental structure, of old bureaucratic models that are designed for governments and not for citizens. Legislatures should pay more attention to public management because, after all, public money makes up about a third of our entire economy. I don't believe so much in fraud and abuse as serious problems. I do believe in waste in the sense that public dollars can be stretched further. The buzzword now in public management is transformation, and it's not a bad word. We need to transform how we're doing things. Ambitious management overhauls, like the California Performance Review, have been very good at identifying waste and duplication, but then too often they have died of their own weight when presented to legislatures. Performance measurement is slowly catching on as new technologies are capable of allowing us to capture data in real time. And some governments, particularly in cities like Baltimore and New York City and Chicago, are doing some amazing things. We have a story on that in this issue, by the way, on how performance measurement is catching on, which I really recommend to you. And I noticed on our website this morning, we have a little section of the website called Ideas Center, and there is an item about Virginia state government that has just put up a website called Virginia Performs. And what it really means is that any citizen in the state of Virginia can see how the government in Virginia is, how public service is performing in all regions of the state, region against region, and then Virginia, how it's performing against all other states. It's a brilliant idea. It's divided up into about 7 different areas. It's something that you ought to take a look at. And then finally, hold on a second. Need some juice here. Finally, quality of life, amenities, environment, and the state of our culture. This is a very amorphous subject. I really had to question whether I ought to include it, but I think I should. It is not easy to define a return on investment here, but arts and amenities, green space, quality design of public structures, good planning for land use and development on a regional basis really matter, probably much more than we realize. Again, I think cities are leading the way. Chicago stands out probably as the foremost example. Denver, Seattle, Portland in both Oregon and Maine, Charleston. Build museums and libraries and they will come. Install bike paths and commuting will skyrocket. They're doing that in Chicago in a massive way now. Preserve quality old architecture and you can revitalize downtown neighborhoods. I've seen it in cities all over the country. Finally, this question of values. I think that in the red and blue back and forth dialogue about values, the so-called social issues, the wedge issues, we're missing a whole lot of common ground that liberal Democrats and Christian conservatives actually share, and we should be accentuating that. There was an article, just let me point out one last anecdote, from another high school, or this is a middle school in a suburban Long Island neighborhood. There was this article that appeared in the New York Times called Middle School Girls Gone Wild. And it is the most emailed article that's been in the New York Times in a long, long time. You know how they list who's emailing most, what is being emailed most. This was the most emailed article for weeks. Very short, written by a guy who took his 10-year-old daughter to his first student talent show at this Long Island middle school. And what he saw there in this talent show absolutely amazed him. It was young girls, these are 12, 13-year-old girls, doing a choreographed dance. And it was close to lewd. And I've seen this sort of thing before. I really wouldn't believe this. But I won't describe it all, but it was extremely sexual, very erotic, and so on. And these girls, in a way, had no idea what they were doing. And when this thing was over, the parents and everybody else were cheering. He adds in this article, "It is news to no one, and not even me, that eroticism in popular culture is a 24-hour all-you-can-eat buffet, and that many children in their early teens are filling up. The latest debate centers on whether simulated intercourse is an appropriate dance style for the high school gym. What surprised me, though, was how completely parents of even younger girls seem to have gotten in step with society's march toward eroticized adolescence, either willingly or through abject surrender. And if parents give up, what can a school do? A teacher at the middle school later told me that she had stopped chaperoning dances because she was put off by the boy-girl pelvic thrusting and had no way to stop it. The children wouldn't listen to her, and she had no authority to send anyone home. She guessed that if the school had tried to ban the sexy talent show routines, parents would have been the first to complain, having shelled out for the costumes and private dance lessons for their little Miss Sunshines. Now that's a problem. And I think we all have to acknowledge it. And it will have a lot to do with, I believe, how we fare in the next 20, 30 years, how our children and their children fare. And so I decided that I would include the question of values in our culture as a competitiveness issue. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna some of these skip through the first couple minutes where they're doing housekeeping stuff, or like stop them at the end when they're just doing the clapping stuff. Sorry about that. I had my phone to make sure I had the audio okay, so it was repeating some of the stuff. So I wonder if he was here today, what he would think about today's kids, because I think things have changed quite a bit, and we're even more over. I mean, like, look at the show Cuties, right? Or you go whatever that show was on Netflix that had the big thing. How people are dressing up their kids. Are kids allowed to be kids anymore? Are we forcing them to be little adults? And our parents forcing, just like they used to say about like dads forcing sports on their kids. Are we forcing other things on the kids? Are moms forcing things on the kids? Is the parents forcing their will on the kids as far as who they want to be for the future? And that goes down the list with the gender ideology stuff, because like kids should be able to feel comfortable in who they are. And I'm not saying that needs to be defined by me. All I'm saying is we need to leave them the hell alone till they're 18 at least, so that way they can figure it out on their own, and we need to support them to be the best person they can be. And they need to feel comfortable with who they are and love themselves, because if not, they're going to have lifelong problems. But I think that's caring about kids. You want to chime in, Chaz?
I'm just over here reading. I'm enamored. I like reading about this stuff. So I'm like, I'm trying to dig into Peter Harkness and like who was the editor of the paper, and some of seeing these names and like these elected representatives, and then I see why we have the problems that we're having. It's because basically it was all designed that it didn't matter who the person was, is because it was already designed before them. So um, I really don't blame like a VTOL. I mean, I do, but it's not the way that I did, when I first started out, because I just see that they're clogging the system. They're a pawn. Somebody controls them, and whoever has the most money that's who their dad is. That's who they're in bed with, and I understand that is that money rules the world, and conversation, it doesn't rule anything yet right now. So
And the other side of it's entitlements, because like I don't expect to get Social Security. As long as my kids don't have to pay into my Social Security, my kids can be better off than I was, and they can afford to live, I will give up my Social Security for my kids. Okay, I will still pay in to support my parents, no problem. I don't expect Jack. Don't force my kids to pay me,
right.
and I'm okay with that. You know.
No, I agree.
So we're gonna go into the next one, and that's going to be from Janet Dolan, former CEO of Tennant Company.
We'll let everyone get in place. Thank you very much. As the mother of one middle schooler and one near-to-be middle schooler, now I'm frightened. No. In your packets are cards for question and answer, and that is how we will do the question and answer. So, well, everyone gets in place up here for the next part of this. If you would like to write a question, and then we'll have collection of those so that we can facilitate orderly question and answer period. That would be terrific. Okay. Which one of you? Janet, you look ready to go? All right. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will, should we say about 10, 15 minutes, and then if you guys have to interact with each other, respond to anything, and then we'll go for the question and answer period here. Okay, thank you.
Well, first of all, good morning. Thank you all for inviting me. I hope I can share some of my experiences, both a business person and a citizen of the world who's been traveling this world since I was 17 and have seen absolutely phenomenal changes in the world as we've moved into this age of globalism. So I hope I can share some thoughts with you. I've tried. I don't have any speaking problem in terms of my voice. What I do intend to do, though, is be conversational as well, just like Mr. Harkness. Okay. Everybody here up in the back? Okay. So I was going to start out, first of all, with, since I'm a lawyer, I always get to start out with caveats. 2 caveats. I realize that a CEO, even a former CEO, coming into a public arena in this age of CEO bonuses, options, and severance packages is probably a dangerous environment. And I know you're all probably thinking, why should we care what business needs with the excesses of business that we're all seeing around us? And for purposes of today's discussion, I urge you to put that aside. None of us like it any better than you do. But we are in an unbelievable changing time in which we all have to work together. And I don't think there's been a time in our American economic and political history when we haven't needed each other more than we do now. Because one of the absolute hallmarks of this global age is that capital can travel anywhere. And so it's exceedingly important for both government and the private sector to really work together to figure out what can we do to keep and attract capital here. And the second caveat I have is that none of us at this table, or Tom Friedman, or anyone else that you read or listen to can possibly predict with any kind of precision what this is all going to mean for you. First of all, it's an evolving concept, globalization, but second of all, it is changing absolutely as we sit here today. As I traveled, and all the rest of you who traveled the world in the late 90s, it was an absolutely open world. It was optimistic. It was full of belief that we were at the dawn of an age of no war, great borderless, great open, welcoming world. Americans were seen as absolutely leaders of innovation and role models for the whole world. Here we are 10 years later, and I'm afraid the doors are closing very quickly. And much of what has gone on may in fact change. We may go back to somewhat of a Cold War. Their part of the world, our part of the world, supply chains may be challenged. So anything that has happened may change in the future, which I know makes your job that much tougher. But just want you to bear in mind, this is a really, really challenging time for you to try to anticipate what's coming. So what I've tried to do is just list what I think are kind of 4 underpinnings of what I'd call the information age, the service economy, globalization, this whole dramatic new age that we're in. Because all you can do is try to take the underpinnings and say, if those are the underpinnings, then what are the implications for us? And I've listed a few things under each one of them that directly apply to you and things that you could do to ensure that Minnesota and our economy remains a competitive advantage for our state. The first is, absolute underpinning is, we are in the age of consumerism. Power has shifted to the individual. When that mainframe went to that little box on your desk, it was more than just a change in how you access your information. That is an absolute imagery of what has happened. The power has shifted to the individual, and that will be felt in all areas that you apply to. Individuals expect better service, better delivery. They know they have the power to move. They're less impressed with big bureaucratic solutions. So the power of the individual is one of the underpinnings of globalization. And I've told this little anecdote before, but I have had absolutely no qualms speaking to the men and women on our shop floor at Tenet when they would say, promise me we'll always have jobs here. And I'll say, did any of you shop at Walmart this weekend? Nothing against Walmart. But you can't expect low consumer prices on Saturday and wonder why your jobs are going to China on Monday. They are directly linked. The consumer expects lower and lower and more efficient delivery of product and service to them, and that has to drive a lower and more efficient production of those products and services, whether it's government services or whether it's consumer goods. So hugely important, and I would urge all of you who aren't well grounded in the principles of capitalism, they've never been more important than right now. I've always said America's works because we have kind of a natural tension between our democratic political system and our capitalistic economic system. And I continue to believe that, but it is the balance is shifting much more to the capitalist side. And so it's very important that you all understand the principles of capitalism so you know how they're going to apply to the economy of the state. Second underpinning is innovation. And you picked up the paper this morning and you see that Boston Scientific is shutting down 500 jobs here, and they're in their long-term research because they have to meet their short-term profit because they were bought by merger. So there's all kinds of inconsistencies around innovation, but innovation is what is driving globalization. When you go to China and India, their goal is not to be the low-cost producer. Their goal is to go up the supply chain and ultimately become the most innovative country and economy in the world. So innovation, those parts of the world economy who can harness and capture innovation and turn it into the next Google or the next driver of their economy is hugely important. So one thing I would urge you to think about is, this is my personal belief, but I think we absolutely need a world-class research institute in this state. But it probably we cannot afford to be world-class in every discipline. So the real question is, what are the real drivers of Minnesota's economy going to be? Is it going to be agro-based? Is it going to be nano? Is it going to be med device-based? What is it going to be? But we need a world-class research institute because you build that critical mass out of which comes the innovation that then leads to the next Google. And having the next Google in your state's not just good for your economy. Google's the very best company in the country to work for, so it's good for employees as well. another challenge to you is that innovation, as Mr. Harkness has already said, certainly applies to how do you deliver government services. You have three big challenges: education, energy, and healthcare. And Katrina, if nothing else, I think has embedded a great cynicism in our population that government does not work. It cannot effectively work. It brings industrial age approaches to information age problems, and that's a real challenge. And I would urge you, as I watched China over 20 years, their absolute principle is innovation begins at the edges. Do not bring big centralized planning structures to solve problems in the 21st.
I'm just going to pause it for 1 second because remember Harlan Cleveland was the guy that had done the gotten in bed with the UN's World Weather Systems program where they said, I don't know, control the weather. So maybe that Katrina stuff was like just like this series, planning the future, right?
First century, have a lot of innovation on the edges, give a lot of leeway for a variety of efforts, and then find the ones that work and then spread them out. But we are coming out of an industrial age where we had an assembly line approach to everything, and now we're in the information age, and it's a very, very different operating model, and you need to bring it to government delivery services as well. Third principle, energy and water are critical. Everywhere you go in the world, India, China, anywhere, their biggest impediment, they believe their biggest impediment to their own economic success is the challenge of scarce resources. So we hear a lot in Minnesota. We've got alternatives, whether it be wind energy, whether it be biofuels, great opportunity. I would urge one caution. Very few economies that rely on a single source like oil or tin or any other natural resource, very few of those provide very big, broad, stable economies. They tend to put a lot of resources in the hands of a few because it doesn't generally take that many jobs to transform the natural resource to the byproduct. So it's a great opportunity for us to take what we have, but it's a caution that it's easy to ride that opportunity and not think about how to build a big, strong economy around it. And the last one is, regardless of how polarized our world may become and whether there are parts of the world that will be off limits to us, there is still a very big, expansive world out there. And one thing employers are really looking for is global employees. So the more in education you can stress languages, the more you can urge that students live abroad. One of the most challenging problems for Minnesota employers is to get Minnesota employees to go live in other countries. And I have heard, the largest proportion of the state is as a state, we have more people in our population who grew up here and are from here than any other state. It's a great compliment that nobody wants to leave, but it does not bode well for having a cosmopolitan global workforce that can really support the global companies of the future. And I just wanted to close with hope, because it's easy to sit with a litany of what are all the challenges going to be. I think Minnesota is in a better position than a lot of parts of the country or a lot of parts of the world. One is location doesn't mean as much as it used to. So it's still probably more attractive on the coast, but the coasts are becoming exceedingly dense and unworkable. We're in a very good position to maintain a large, cosmopolitan, attractive area. Global warming's making it even more attractive. That works. And that works is a very important element. Minnesota, of the 50 states, has a great track record for innovation. I mean, we are seen as a part of the country where if you said, what state do you think might come up with breakthrough thinking in healthcare, breakthrough thinking in education? I'm not sure energy yet, but we might fool them. It would be Minnesota. So we have a track record. And then the last is we have a great foundation to build on. Anybody who tells you about bringing about change says there's nothing better than having a great foundation to build on. The caution is don't let that great track record lull you into complacency. That's the real risk. Is if you go to China and India and any of these countries, they are hungry Just as we were hungry at the beginning of the 20th century to outdo Europe, they are hungry to outdo us. And the real risk of being one of the better places that succeeded in the 20th century is that we will lull ourselves into complacency and wait too long to take very seriously that we have to work hard to maintain that position in the 21st century.
Okay, so me and Chaz are back. So she basically said a lot there, and just remember, okay, Minnesota, I don't know, 3M nanoparticles. Okay, you got the food cartels, as she talked about, with the agribusiness. And then you have Medtronics and Mayo and the U of M with that side of it. Now, Cray Computers, which was the supercomputers, started at the U of M. The Chippewa Falls is where his main manufacturer ended up being. Through the U of M, he helped sell it to NASA, the CIA for the supercomputers. And in the 90s, he gave it to China. So basically, Minnesota and okay, you look at the number of foundations started by these groups and these people that came out of these companies. Okay, their legal representation. Ellen Luger Goldberg's sister was general counsel for both Medtronics, and I believe she was involved with the Cargill Foundation. One of her family members was, and then Ellen was General Mills, right? And she now runs USDA programs for USAID out of Rome, and her husband was U.S. attorney up here. So you don't think that these guys actually have power? Like, these are the people literally planning not only your future, but the future of others around you. So is it quote unquote supremacy of any individual or group, or is it just these freaks that are these big business and then they end up being socialist for a lot of them, or they're just concerned about themselves, so they'll use whatever ism is in style at the time to be able to make money? Because you really got to look at that, especially with the UN and the WF and a couple of those other organizations, CFR, their push for those DEI metrics. Because Minnesota is number one or number two, whatever economy in the nation for those DEI matrix. It's for the matrix that they made up. And when I'm not trying to be mean, but these matrix are like the carbon credits. They don't exist. The plants naturally put carbon into the ground, whether you're measuring it or not. It'd be like me going out in my yard and selling the carbon credits from my yard to the local gas station for the gas that people are pumping, and charging them a 2 cents a gallon for the gas in my yard, or not gas, the carbon in my yard being sequestered. And I'm not saying that in a bad way. Is people are diverse, okay? And so, like, if you're making these these matrix around it, you're incentivizing certain things. You're making money off of things that exist naturally, like pet rocks. Head Jazz.
I'm just like, I'm totally, especially with my research, I've gone into like 3M and Honeywell, and just to hear about, like the PAFs and, the forever chemicals, and then I hear about nanomaterials, and it just all makes more sense of now why like these companies were allowed to do the things they were able to do because they were paying lobbyists to politicians, through kickbacks and grants and, whatever way they wanted to do it back then. Because it is obviously a little bit different now, but because a lot of this is in play and they're, oh, well, maybe never mind.
They
it
are
obviously
coming up this year, dude. Ask Mrs. Demuth.
Oh yeah, Lisa.
Yes, I will show. I will at the end. We're going to show literally the program for this year's One Minnesota. What I'm saying is these groups. Okay,
Right.
Hubert Humphrey's School of Public Affairs really pushed. Okay, public affairs, you have to realize, got started by Eddie Bernays. It's propaganda. It's the school of government propaganda, and they teach these companies how to propagandize the legislators. Literally, these people get paid to go tell the legislators what to do and how they should be thinking, just like lobbyists do. Okay. These are paid influencers like social media influencers, but these are like high level government influencers.
Right.
And so if you don't think that it's not me, it's not you, it's you have to go up higher, man.
Higher. Right. It's classism, and I understand that. It's like, I'm in this. I signed up for this program. It's through the. I'll show it to you later, but it's some kind of like college course, right? That I signed up for. It's like 2 courses, and it's with our artificial intelligence. Um, but it's crazy of like there's other individuals, but because they're willing, they get paid. They're okay, but yet we have the same story. We have different experiences. I've been in, and that's the saddest part. Is like I watch these committee hearings, and they bring people up like Eliza Darris or Elle Flowers or Jerry McAfee or Sharif Willis. I'm not discounting their experiences. They're none of that, right? But everybody's story is not the same. Everybody's experience is not the same. And just because we have a few people that we can call leaders and talking pieces, there's a whole bunch of people behind them that aren't heard. And that's where like I get into it with like Walter Hudson or AK Kamara or yeah, you're black. I'm not disqualifying that. You know what I'm saying? I'm not. But listen, we have different experiences. Your dad came over here as an immigrant. My family's already been here through slavery. We like built this country. So why do we uplift, black immigrants and people that just are getting over here, and we're forgetting about the foundations of generations that basically kind of some of stories had nothing. It was illegal to read. It was illegal to write, if you looked like a certain way. So I mean, it's kind of frustrating to me of like when I see, they talk about this DEI, but yet I don't see DEI that look like me. It's all people that like are Nigerian, are Ethiopian, Somalian, the Pakistani, and you know what I'm saying? I'm like, wait,
And
that's
now you're seeing it's planned. Like literally, I'm giving you how they planned it. Okay. And you think that they weren't played right after slavery and stuff too, or dream slavery, and like, okay, you got to realize that, okay, Harlan Cleveland was related to President Cleveland, and then the Van Buren, whatever president that was. These people are like connected, man, and it's like I'm just saying,
I
it's
know
not.
that's what somebody told me of like, if you want to know how America is ran, follow the money. You know what I'm saying? Like every corporation in your state, like I know Mayo Clinic and runs Rochester, because we've seen that through legislative sessions where there was bills that would be for the people, but because of profits, that's what let I will just say Governor Walls, you know what I'm saying? He uh, he got punked, and it was like it was crazy how there was legislation, but Mayo was left out of it. And that's the part they don't ever want to tell you is that the rest of the hospitals had to abide, but not Mayo Clinic. And honestly, that's not. I feel like no one is better than anybody else, and we're all the same. And yes, we come in different shades. We come in, different colors, and but we all have the nose, the two eyes, the mouth. And I don't want to rant. I don't want to vent. So because I can go. Right. Is it profits or profits? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
kind of
that's exactly it. No, no, I was excited when you were saying that, dude. You're good because
right.
like
I do it.
that's what
I love
everything
that.
we've been talking about. Oh, sorry, I'll let
No,
you.
go ahead.
No, everything we've been talking about, I'm trying to bring together because like I'm just trying to show people that like literally it's been planned, okay, and it's not Republican or Democrat because guess what? In the 80s, it was all Republicans running the CIA, the Iran Contra, the kitty diddling with Craig J. Spence with what was his name? The Lawrence guy out of Lawrence King or what was it out of Franklin Dealio? You know what I mean? and you go down the list, okay, and yeah, it turned into Jeffrey Epstein, but you know, it didn't start out on the left, buddy. You know what I mean? And we seriously gotta wake up to the fact that it's both sides, and that's the thing is like I piss off everybody, and that's the reason I don't have many followers is because I have followers that are communists and I have followers that are Nazis, literally. And I'm not saying that, ha ha. Why? Because like I'm just trying to say we have more that the brings us together than what separates us, like what she said. Okay, so those that distrust the government and distrust the government system, both sides distrust Trump, but for different reasons. Okay, one he's not right wing enough, and the other are completely that the DFL isn't even good enough for them. But we have something in the middle, and that is that like the stuff about Palestine, you know what I mean? The stuff about the corruption with Israel controlling as much as they do with APAC or whatever you may, or whoever. And okay, Russia Gate, you go down the list, but I mean, like, Russia doesn't have Russia Pack. I mean, just saying, you know what I mean? But it's when we have these outside organizations with so much influence and money that they then come in and influence things. And propaganda is you want to get somebody to do something that is against their best interest, and they know it. So you have to convince them through word salad and good feeling, whatever, or hatred to achieve their goals. And people make money off it, you know, and they grift off it. I'm a disabled vet, and the only reason why I say that is because the VA is the one that told me I couldn't work because they weren't going to fix me. Okay, the stuff I'm doing, I'm not trying to make money. Once I get everything up and running with the website and everything else, it's that I'm not going to be a nonprofit because, like, nonprofits, you have to have a board and you have to have this, that, and the other thing. But a company doesn't need to make money. So when I eventually do start up my stuff, it'll be that, and I'll show you guys exactly where it's going, you know. But being able to be like, oh, hey, this person needs this, and go pay it, I can do that, and like it's not income, then it's an expense, and you know, even if like it's not the mission of my business, like the IRS can't hit me for having spent something on like helping somebody and buying them a meal, right? It's not like I'm doing it for me or whatever, but like, you know, it's you see where I'm going with that? Like there's a whole way to do it that you totally flip the whole entire system back on them because you use the rules that they meant for bad and you switch it around for good. You can give your employees a lot more money by doing certain things and whatever else. And there's things that I'm working on internationally because like I'm not going to end up like the guy who got killed in the Buffalo shooting for making a water powered car. So I'm not going to end up like that. So the stuff I'm doing overseas is I'm not going to talk about it too much. I don't want to have to patent it. I don't want to have that type of stuff. And it's really simple. It's like simple energy in versus energy out, alternative energy stuff that can work in humid environments in the tropics, which is the 1040 window has a huge area of people that don't even have clean water, you know. But being able to do all that at the same time really cheaply, helping them be able to want to stay in their country because we're bettering their country without them needing to come here, you know. And so I'm going to try to say, hey, you just can't come here. Hey, let's help you better your country, but don't do it have to think it's the American way of screwing everybody over, because that's not what most Americans are about. A few globalist elite within our country have screwed everybody, including us. So welcome to the club. Let's fix it together. You know, let's make your country good, but that doesn't mean I want you here. I want to make my country good. You know, just because I don't want you here doesn't mean I hate you. And I'm not saying I don't want immigrants here. What I'm saying is like, if I invite you, Chaz, over to my place, right? And then you invite 5 friends over, and then you never leave. And then not only that is you're expecting me and my 5 neighbors then to take care of you. That's not really sustainable in the long term if every 2 weeks you're bringing 2 more friends over.
Right.
And last year, they had quite a few. They just came out with a news article saying that with Trump's new order, 6,500 immigrants aren't going to be coming to Minnesota for the refugee programs. Is that a month? Is that I have questions on that. Is that a
Right,
year? Is
right,
that I mean, because I can only give so much, dude, and I'm not going to give you my kids' stuff.
right.
I'm going to make sure my kids are taken care of before me. It doesn't mean I'm not going to help you out, but at least I want to make sure me and mine are taken care of before. And what you guys see though is you think that from the inner city or wherever community. I'm not saying you guys like in a bad way, but
Oh,
like
no.
you think that it's white guys taking it away from you, or whatever else. When we're like, but
But
hey, we've been
honestly,
told for 20 years, we've been told that it's we're giving it to you guys because of white supremacy. For
but you know
30
what?
years, we've been saying that.
I've
You
never
know,
seen it that way though, and I'm gonna be honest, is like even when it comes to, and I hate this because I kind of feel like it ended our, I had a relationship kind of with like West London out of Rochester, but then it was like I would go at, I wouldn't shouldn't say go at, call out, Republicans in the area because I live in southern Minnesota, and but he's a registered Republican, so am I, but he was also running for politics. I don't. So my thing is it's always for the people, and I don't care about, profits. I care about people. And that's one thing that I still stand on to this day is that, there's different individuals and everybody has a different price. So everybody's morals and integrity have a price tag. But I'm starting to realize that some people, their morals and integrity don't have a price tag with it because it's just natural to them. You know what I'm saying? And they wear their heart on their sleeve, and I fuck with that. You know what I'm saying? We there's people that I would rather suffer and get it the long way. You know what I'm saying? Than getting it, doing whatever you have to do to get ahead and go against your morals and your integrity because people think that it's a black and a white thing. No, it's right versus wrong.
and I
It's
don't. I mean, I piss off both sides, and I don't mean to. I'm going to call it out. And
right.
if an individual that just happens to be a Republican, deal with it. Because most politicians, like if you're DFL, you go along to get along. So you're going to protect your guys over, and you're going to do the opposition research and go after those guys. Because you know what? If you and a Republican actually sat down and talked, you could probably come up with some good ideas about like how do we meet in the middle and how do we like actually improve the country rather than divide and go this way.
You know,
Because all it is who's pulling the puppet string. So they're pulling it this way. Now we're pulling it that way. And that's all it is, dude.
and I want to give an example of that, right? Because you have a black man, let's say, let's look at Bobby Champion. We got Walter Hudson, and then we have AK Kamara. All black, they're black men. But you have one Democrat, and then you have two Republicans, but one lives in St. Michael, and then one lives in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. But it's all crazy because they all have different experiences, right? Doesn't they all have what we call black excellence? But how did they get there? Bobby is a Democrat who's a felon and who has a badass past, right? I won't say bad, but has a past. Then we go with Walter, who's black, but then when it comes to writing legislation and doing things, is it good for just his constituents and his community, or is it for everybody that he's writing it for? He says he's writing it for all of Minnesota. Well, what about the urban black man that lives in the Twin Cities like Minneapolis and St. Paul that doesn't live in St. Michael or Maple Grove area and isn't
I'm gonna hold you up right there though, because like, I, okay, they're going down. They're writing the MMPOA so much, and they're writing Andrew Luger so much that
right?
I have to call out those guys. Okay, Andrew Luger is the guy that hired on Leslie Raymond or Redmond to sit
Redmond.
there and go after the city of Minneapolis, so then he could defend the police and get the contract for that. Well, having unregistered lawyers, okay, it's like unregistered plumbers. They have to register in the damn state. There's laws
Right.
on these things.
Well,
And he's
didn't
the
they?
one that had covered up the Metro Gang Task Force stuff where only one officer had gotten away with it. And oh, by the way, in the 90s, when Trump had testified about the mob's involvement in the gambling, and it came out that there was not only the Lucchese, but the Gambino and the La Cosa Nostra crime family through the FBI's own words. Okay, these are all like well-known news articles and stuff like that, or the FBI. I mean, this congressional testimony that I'm talking about, he got brought up here to cover that up. Okay,
Right.
and so like all I'm saying is like I'm not saying that I dislike the guy. I'm just saying be careful who you're hitching your damn horse to. And the MMPOA knows that all because the MMPOA helps cover up some of the stuff too. They do good stuff too. I'm not saying all cops are bad. What I'm saying is like if I'm saying my crap doesn't stink on the left and you're just mad because people on the left said their stuff doesn't stink and they do lawfare and everything else, but you're doing the same thing on the right, you both are extreme assholes and
Really
stop
wrong.
it.
Right.
Because you're talking about Brady violations. You're talking about Brady violations is the cops can get up there and lie on the stand. They can do whatever the heck they want, and there's no civil penalties for that, including they can violate your Miranda rights. They can violate all your constitutional rights. And Minnesota's trying to get away from any sort of oversight of that. And it got so bad, the Minnesota Bar Association memed it. They put out a meme about it here in Minnesota. I'll let you talk then, and then I'll pull up that meme real quick.
Yeah, because it's wild to me. Of like, I'm not saying one party is better than the other. I understand that both parties are part of the problem because you have, Republicans and they like to promote in the black community, right? Of that, there's Walter Hudson and Lisa DeMuth. Well, most black individuals and people don't even know them. They know a Ilan Omar or a Jason Chavez or a Andrea Jenkins, and I disagree with them. It's they say they're for the people, but yet I kind of feel like they're there for the kickbacks. You know what I'm saying? It's like give us uh, even the donations that just came out for the mayors and the councils races this year, and I sent that to some people in Minneapolis, and they're like, "Wait, we all know that Minneapolis is a liberal city, and they see Feeding Our Future comes out, and it's been out for years, and yet these people have these type of donations. It's like you really don't want accountability or even responsibility when it comes to Minneapolis because you allow your elected officials to be able to point in a direction and blame it on somebody else instead of being that person. And it's wild to me. It's like we let it go and we allow it, and we don't say much about it because people are paid, and that's been my experience. It's been over and over again.
I can't find the Minnesota Bar Association one right now. I have it in my archives somewhere. But yeah, this is a presentation that was given to like the International Association of Chiefs of Police. So like it's an issue, bro. Like why are you guys making up laws to make it less of an issue?
I mean, to be honest, I kind of feel like it was designed like that because, even up at the state capitol, you've seen like Bob Fletcher or, other sheriffs do presentations, especially about the Brady. You know what I'm saying? You brought a sheriff up that if he can dispute Brady for his officers, it's like, where does the transparency and truth come to play? Because it's like I'll take it a step further. You said that all cops aren't bad, and I'm gonna take it a little bit step further than that because in my eyes they are all bad. Because when you do the right thing, we come to find out that you're called a snitch or you're called a whistleblower, and I don't even know how many people watch TV and they see it on their favorite like Chicago PD or SVU. And if you tell them, I mean, even in TV shows, they won't tell on another cop. You know what I'm saying?
Where
So
did I
why
see
would
it?
Would you
The
do
only
it in
reason
the
I say
street?
that is that, like, if you have somebody shooting at you, you want a cop to come, right?
Right.
Like, if you have someone breaking into your house, you're gonna want a cop to come.
No,
You
man,
know, if what's up?
not me.
Well,
I
I'm just
don't.
saying there's
You know what I'm saying? I mean, I used to be like that, but I will say that after with George Floyd, I don't call the police anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like I, I've I've had that experience of like I've had things stolen and thing you don't get the type of response that you did when we were growing up with police. It's totally different. I mean, I'll be honest, and I don't mean to rant or whatever, but it is totally different of like policing in the 80s and 90s compared to now.
oh, definitely. I'm just saying personally, like they have some sort of value in society, meaning like there's a balance between anarchy and order. Does that make sense? And where we draw that line, there has to be somebody willing to be in the middle of that. So
Right.
wherever you draw that line, you're not going to want Tren de Agua or whatever that is coming into your place and like doing whatever they want to your entire family, probably. Um, so all I'm saying is there's a balance there. Where we draw that line is and have we used the law enforcement the way that we think they're supposed to be used, and what is their actual use? Because originally they were to protect property over people, especially with the riots, the labor riots that were going on in the early or late 1800s, and you go down the list, and right, um, and and then also like in the Wild West type stuff, but there's been a shift also on how we act as a society. If we're not able to self-govern ourselves, then somebody else is going to have to govern that for us. If we have a lack of responsibility, like one of the things I have heard with organized retail theft is that that's a form of reparations. Well, if that's a form of reparations, then um, sorry, if you're taking somebody else's stuff, at some point you're either going to get shot or you're going to get thrown in jail. That's just the way that works. There's a different way to approach that. But if you're saying that it's your view that you're owed that and you're going to do it no matter what, there's no logical way I can talk you all out of it. There has to be some sort of other deterrent, uh, you know. And I think the reparation stuff, there's a discussion to be had on that, but we have to end the immigration reparations first because we're giving reparations to people who are just coming over here and setting them up for all these bennies and whatever else when we haven't even taken care of the native population. So how about we do America first and Minnesota first before we discuss quote unquote reparations? You know what I mean? Like
I mean,
we didn't stop and think anywhere along the lines
I'm
here.
not, you know what, you make a very good point is because we talk about, healing and when we talk about reparations, it's repairing something that was happened in the past, right? Um, and making it better in the future. And yes, when people, this is my thing of it is like I've seen so many people lately say that we're on stolen land. Well, explain why we're on stolen. Don't just say it's stolen because here's my explanation of it is that, and I'm going to shorten it for people, is that it was stolen, but they were bamboozled. There was a very big language barrier. You know what I'm saying? So the land was rich, but that's not what they paid for it. They paid pennies on a dollar for something. So eh, I talked about this with like Uncle Ben's rice and Aunt Jemima. Yes, they got screwed. I feel like they got screwed over for their talents, their inventions, uh, but yet their legacy lives on because now that we got rid of and jumped on like, oh, that's racist. Uncle Ben's rice and Aunt Jemima, they got rid of that, and you're only starting to see now that Trump is in office that all those things that they were erasing, they're bringing back. So it's like, how can that's not? I don't see that
I have
as
a
bad.
friend that is a native guy, and he's like, "No, we need to bring back the Redskins because that was like an Indian chief that we were proud of." You know what I mean?
Right.
You know, whatever else. And there's a couple different sides to everything with that. You know,
It
and have
comes
we
down to
gone too?
inflation. Even like with the 14th Amendment right now, it's all about, none of us were here when they were arguing the 14th Amendment. We weren't even thought about. We weren't born. So we don't know the context or the interpretation, but we understood that the civil rights was happening, Emancipation Proclamation. So we can only realize is that the 14th Amendment, the year that it was added, that it had to be about black slaves. It had to be about the descendants, to making sure that they had citizenship and that they were Americans. I don't want to bring this into a whole immigration thing, but that's what honestly, of like the way that I see it, is like none of us were here when our founding fathers and they were arguing. First of all, it's above our pay grade because those are senators that are arguing it and debating and all those things. So honestly, it comes down to interpretation, and it comes down to context. And I've seen it where it comes with, even with the judicial system, is that if you're a Republican or you're a Democrat or if you're a Green Party or you're DSA, whatever you are, you're going to read and interpret in context everything differently than the next person.
Oh, definitely. And like you have to realize that some of these tribes, they were actually enslaving each other too. And some of them also were helping us attack them and them attacking us. And it's the same thing with the slaves. Okay, some supported the slaves and some turned them in, and some slaves helped them attack certain colonies and whatever else. And so like some of those and they didn't always attack the rich landlords, right? They attacked the towns. Well, it maybe it was the poor people living in the towns, and it wasn't the rich landlords living out on their estate. And so some of these divisions you have to realize have been implanted in there since the beginning, and
Well,
it's
yeah,
the
and
same
I don't mean to
against
go
each
off,
other
but
rather than
right, and it's the same thing of even like when we're talking about like the 14th Amendment and all that. You had Northern Democrats and you had Southern Democrats. You know what I'm saying? Just like now we have DSA and then we have Democrats. Well, it's all supposed to be DFL, but when you really look at it, it's
in
really not.
Minnesota. It actually started out the Communist Party literally joined into the Democrat Party. That's how we got the DFL. So it was the communists and the DFL that got together. I'm going to get back into the audio, and then we can chat more after the next one. But I want to sort of get a little bit through more of the audio, and we'll continue to chat as we go along, and you'll see how it'll build. And we'll probably have an episode where we'll just sit here and spitball it based on what we've learned so far, too.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I just want to start out by thanking you for what you do for Minnesota. Over the next several months, you're going to put a lot of the rest of your life on hold. And a lot of you are excited about that, but I know it's hard work, and each and every one of you is making some degree of sacrifice to make this state a better place. And I really want to thank you. The other thing I want to do is just give you a little background on myself to know where my comments are coming from. It's sometimes helpful. I am Minnesota educated. I've lived in the state my whole life. I am an optimist by trade. I am an unabashed, proud Minnesotan and want to make this state a better place to live, work, and play. This is a great state, and each and every one of us can make a difference. I am also a mathematician. So I thought I would share with you 3 things that I keep track of, 3 statistics, if you would, that I think are important to each and every one of us. The first is demographics. The population is aging. If you look at the period 1990, estimated to 2010, our workforce in Minnesota grew 25%. If you look at the period 210 to 230, we estimate it's going to grow 9%. Our retirees will double. That will affect the state's economy. And either you act today or you will act tomorrow with more urgency and a bigger problem. The second thing is diversity. Over 40% of the kids entering the St. Paul school system come from a home that English is not the first language. and an educational background is generally not there. Think of the challenge that presents. In addition, in many respects, from an educational perspective, this group is low performing. So now you have a business where most of your customers come in with more demands and more challenges, and yet it is the future of the state, how you educate your population. And third, global economy. I have the privilege, as Janet did, to chair the Minnesota Business Partnership. In that capacity, at some level, I represent 112 of the largest corporations in this state. How many of you in the room know that 80% of the workers of those companies do not reside in Minnesota? Think of how that has changed in the last 50 years or in the last 10 years. It's a competitive environment, and we want more of those jobs in Minnesota. So with those facts, I'm going to put my business hat on. What do you do about it? First, let's make Minnesota a magnet. We want to keep our kids. We want to keep our companies. We want to keep our jobs. We want to do the necessary things to make Minnesota a magnet. If we do that, we can compete in the next century. The second thing, solve, do not study. We know the problems, guys. We really do. It is time for serious solution to problems that exist, not only in Minnesota, but in this country. Resolve to make a difference. Pick something you're passionate about and make a difference. It's time to solve it. The third thing is be positive. I don't know if you realize the effect that you have on companies' decisions to expand or not expand over time. Being positive about Minnesota's future creates an environment that is infectious. Partisanship, unfortunately, is not leadership. It is time to be positive about Minnesota because we have a great state with great companies, and it's our job to try to make the next century just as good as the last century. Let's not waste the opportunity. So once again, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I'll open it up for questions now. And certainly thank you for inviting us.
While we collect the first set of questions, I'm going to ask Peter if you would like to respond to anything you heard, or otherwise I have a first question for.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, and maybe we'll answer this at the end because I don't want to put you on the spot. But I think that when I heard each of you speak, you each referenced other thinkers in terms of folks who are writing or speaking about the issues of the day. And so maybe at the end of our question and answer period, you could each leave us with one or two others who you are reading or interacting with who would be interesting for us to read or interact with in the next phase of this. So that's, and if you're ready to go with that, that's fine. Otherwise,
I'm going to pause it there. We're going to pick up on that audio next week. So we're going to be done with that audio for this week, just because it's a lot to digest and it's a lot to go over. If you hear any noise in the background, I'm sorry. I have a family, so you have to deal with
we all
it.
do.
I mean, but I just think it's cool to be able to discuss this stuff, and we'll get other people on here too to discuss with us. But I just think it's interesting to look at history, and let's actually go back and see where One Minnesota started. This wasn't a Walls program. This is a program put in place back in the 70s, man. And how did we get here? And I don't know if in 50 years we haven't done it right. Maybe we should stop and think, how to go forward in the future. And same thing with everything that we're doing. We can stop and evaluate and actually see where we've been and where we're going. Because if we don't do that, then I don't think that we're doing it very wisely,
No.
and we can stop blaming each other in between. And again, when I said that about the reparations stuff, I'm not trying to piss off the pro or anti reparations people. All I'm saying is that if we're already doing it for the foreign nationals, and we know that, I don't know, it's easier to get somebody that is partially there, that's here, up to wherever the standards are for hiring. We should not only owe it to the Americans first, and to your state first, into your county first, into your city first, but we also owe it to each other too, because that's the only way we can preserve American culture. Because otherwise, when we import people, we're also importing their culture and we're diluting our own. And so you will see that, and you will see the cliquish of the in group and out group, but especially if you elevate them above natives, you're going to see them do that battle right there. And is that battle actually being addressed, or is it still saying, oh, like in rural Minnesota, in Worthington, yeah, I can go down the list. And then once we get to the demographic portion, you'll really see what I'm saying with that. Is they've flooded certain communities as well, outside of Minneapolis with refugees, and they expect there to be a balance without uh, any cultural awareness in between. And you can't go from a county that was 60%, or I should say 90% or more homogenous a decade ago, 2 decades ago, and now it's 60% of the school kids in one of the schools, I believe is down in St. James, are immigrants. You can't go through that change without some tensions. And will people be defensive thinking they're being replaced? Probably. And are they being replaced? Well, in fact, there's a plan for it. So, I mean, you're being replaced too, bud. All Americans are,
Right.
and they literally told us that.
But you can't tell people that because they get frustrated and then they don't understand it, because you have a certain side of politics um that I feel blocking that, the education, that liberation, because there's money to be made in chaos. And I will leave it, I will say that, you know what I mean? And like I don't care about, what people think about what I interpret or and I'll call it that. It's my interpretation, it's my perspective, because I wasn't alive when Martin Luther King did I Have a Dream speech. I just know that a gay man and two white men helped him write that speech. And that I know how to, there's other ways to interpret that. And those aren't his words. You know what I'm saying? So is that what we see now is, his civil rights dream. And honestly, I don't know. You go back into history and, some people tell you, well, the FBI wrote bad about him, so you can't believe everything you see or you read. And it's like, damn, no wonder why we do the shit that we do today, because as long as CNN or Fox or, Carrie Levin or, the local news stations post something and talk about it, it's real life, it's real. But yet if the streets are talking about it, it's not real. And now we're seeing that the streets talk about it before mainstream media ever talks about it.
Well, it's interesting because if you look at some of his advisors, you look at Harlan Cleveland's advisors, you look at, okay, all I'm saying is when you find the common denominator and you try to disprove it, and you go through, I don't know, 100, 200 people, and all their advisors end up being from either the same group or the same types of groups, you might be onto something. And it's not saying that I hate these people. It's just saying uh, we probably shouldn't have them running our government, and we probably shouldn't just be listening to them if they have a proven track record of being wrong, of doing us wrong, of you see where I'm going with that. And so I don't know, George Bush, senior, junior, Obama, who got his start with the CIA under Reagan and who George Bush did too, in the CIA and Iran Contra and Ollie North and Ollie North. They rolled back out as if he was some sort of hero after 9/11. War correspondent on Fox News. Yeah, they get pardoned. Are you kidding me? Because he was running drugs to the streets? Oops, that guy? Oh, well, you know what I mean? And the left does it too, though, and realizing both sides do it, and both sides have these little puppets they put in front of us to be like, oh, here's what you do. Follow this, follow that. Don't look over here. I have no clue what the truth is about all these planes crashing. I know there's some planes crashes do happen sometimes. Could it be
Right.
something else? Yeah, it probably is. Is that going to be the first thing I jump to? I'm going to wait for the facts a little bit
Right.
because, the only reason I say that is because I dealt with two crashes when I was in the Navy as the
Right.
aviation med tech. We were the ones that did the mishap investigations afterwards. One of them is a pilot that had night vision goggles that thought he was Billy Badass and didn't trust his sensors on his aircraft. And he flew his helicopter, which was an H-60, right into the side of a wave. And he ended up in one of the trenches off the coast of San Diego. And it was the same sort of thing out in Arizona when I was stationed out there. Just okay. If you know where El Centro, California is, that's halfway between San Diego and Yuma. So it's halfway between San Diego and Arizona. There's this desert. It used to be an old seabed that has these huge sand dunes. Right north of there is a huge gold mine. Imagine that has a bombing range basically right on top of it. And that bombing range has been there for quite a while. It's also where the SEALs do their training for desert warfare. You have the army that's out there doing their hey ho jumps. Basically, it's a lot of spooky type stuff. People out there and whatever else, and do a lot of cool high speed low drag training. Well, when you're training in high risk environment, guess what? You're going to have high risk because you're training in a high risk environment. They wouldn't call it a high risk environment. Anyway, they train with the night vision goggles and that. Night vision goggles have zero depth perception. I can't remember. I think it was two helos that hit each other right around 2012 when I was out there. All right, it was right before I transferred over to MOTS 1. Um, and yeah, that was the reason why is they just ran into each other's human error due to the night vision goggles and whatever else. So it does happen, and there had been quite a few in that regional region entirely before that that had gone down. So it's not like an abnormal thing on the military side. On the civilian side, it is. But if you just look up military plane crashes, they happen more than you think.
Oh yeah, I agree. No, I agree. I mean, it's just I think we see it. It's in the news and like our social media is more often now. So it's like again, I'm going to say this: if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. But now it's in our sight. Now it's in our mind. So you know what I'm saying? Like we have our we get everybody gets their news different, and it's like just like with the story in Philadelphia. Like if we were,
Leave
I
the
got
world behind too.
right, right. You know what I'm saying? If we lived in a different time where, we didn't have all these social media things, would we have known about the the three plane crashes this week with, Washington, DC, Philadelphia, and then even I think it's either in San Antonio or Houston. You had that army jet crash. And it's like,
There's
would
an Air
we have
Force one
known
up
that?
in Alaska, I know, with an F
Oh yeah,
35
Alaska.
out of
That's
the
what it was.
sky.
Alaska. You're right.
Yeah.
Alaska. My bad. Alaska. You're
Those
right.
F-35s, though, don't even get me started on those things. They basically, it's like this super smart aircraft that has all this whatever. The problem is the electronics fail, okay? And
Right.
if 90% of your aircraft is controlled by electronics and yeah, and you have no manual system backups, and you're sort
Well,
of
just like the FSD we're getting into with Tesla, and now it's a service to where when you buy a Tesla, it drives itself from it. The fact the Tesla factory all the way into the your house, by itself, and it's like wow, so it only makes you wonder of like, what are they trying to program people for? Because it's already we can tell that these systems can be hacked. So I don't get it, but I don't know. I'm here for it. I will say that.
If you saw on social media, they had Tanya Harding just joined X or whatever, right?
I
And
followed
if
her.
people don't know who Tanya Harding is, okay, she's the one who had her ex-boyfriend end up like stabbing somebody with a skate. I don't know. It was something like crazy like that, right? And then Nancy Kerrigan, I think, was the one who was attacked.
She was the one
Wasn't
that
it
was
her?
attacked. Yep, it was Nancy. Yeah,
Yeah.
she had her boyfriend attack Nancy Kerrigan. Like hit her
Okay,
hit
but
her at a
here's the
knee.
thing, though. Is their outfits are almost exactly that they were wearing on social media were very similar to the outfits they were wearing at their media time back in the 90s, including Nancy Kerrigan had that tan, almost skin color leotard that had the high neck like a turtleneck, right? And that's exactly what Nancy Kerrigan had on as she was crying on TV, just like it was in the 90s. And I'm sorry, but
Right.
that's a little bit of repeating too much there, buddy, for me to just take the bait on that.
Well, no, and it is, and I believe it's like if people picked up a book, if they read a little bit, I think we would be a lot further. And to be honest, Tucker Carlson is a hero in my book. That is somebody who has, and we're seeing this even more and more with like Don Lemon. Some of the
1 second,
biggest.
who is he saying that Tucker Carlson called a hero? That's what I was asking.
Oh, my bad. Oh, I think it was
Was that Ollie North or
not. I don't think it was North. It was what's the one name you said had to do with maybe I might be wrong. Maybe I might be doing Olive North, but I thought it was when you said that. I can't think of this so many names. Damn it, and it's on the tip. I don't know who Ben's talking about. To be honest.
okay? Well, if you can message us, we'll definitely bring it up next time too, because we're getting towards the end of people's ability to watch and listen.
Right, right. Start to lose.
Well, I'll try to be back each week. I'll try to cut them down into smaller episodes. But we'll be going over the clips. Actually, you know what? We'll probably keep it about 2 hours because some of these clips are an hour long, and I want to get through this stuff. And then if it's stuff people haven't listened to, we're also going to put in the links to the information down below. Where you can actually go look at these studying things on your own. You can do your own research. I'm not telling you anything you can't go find on your own.
Right.
And you can read. I believe in you. And come to your own conclusions. But just don't believe everything that you've been taught or heard.
Well, and that's the crazy part of it is like with all of this, we can't only just talk about it, but also people, at home can also look up at these things. You know what I'm saying? Because this is a website that you went to and got the links, at the Minnesota State Legislature. So right there goes right there. Robert put the link in the chat. And you hit that and it's all there. They talk about the 2021 caucus, they talk about early education. Uh there's a various things that talk about that today you see immigration, you see talking about transgender. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say I know I will. Transgender. There's a, a bunch of things that we are facing today, and it wasn't people just think it just pops up. No, it's designed and it was here before then.
When on that too, if you realize, okay, so they push abortion. Uh, Once you undergo the transgender treatments, you can no longer have biological children. Um, but they're complaining about a lack of American workers. So they're pushing. It's self-genocide. I'm just going to say what it is. They're pushing self-genocide, and for us to be able to genocide ourselves while blaming each other and importing our replacements. And just like the Hunger Games, they plan to be at the top. So I mean, I don't want to genocide myself. Now we're getting to the point where it's post-humanism. So I'm sorry, I don't want to have the human race be extinct. I'd rather do you want to extinct yourself? I don't think so,
Most
right?
people don't even know what that means, and that's crazy because there's a plant in Stewartville. They're building. It's for pig to human, so they can. We have the pig valves in our hearts. You know what I'm saying? And then there's mammals, or I guess we'll call them mammals or whatever, animals that are like humans. Their body parts or whatever, and we're gonna start to see more and more of technology involved. Just like I watched the episode, and I don't want to be too long, but I watched this episode on TV of the show called, I think it's called Accused, and this lady bought her husband a sex doll. Well, the sex doll offered him what he was looking for, sex. Oh, Oliver North and his wife didn't because she was busy. She was worried about her job, and he ended up leaving his wife for the sex doll. And I honestly do see that happening, just like with Tiffany Haynard got into a fight. You know, a mayor of a town of a city gets into a fight with her constituents, and I do believe we're going to start seeing these things more and more and more because people are fed up. And I'll leave it at that. I'll land my plane there.
Oh, definitely. Also, check out DJ Be Lethal. We're gonna drop the link real quick to the B sides down below, and you can find him on LLR Radio. Is it LLROhio.com, I believe, and Jerry's DJ Be Lethal is restreaming this right now. And so hopefully we'll do more collaboration with him in the future too. If you have anything last words real quick, I'm going to pull that up as I'm going to turn off my camera, and everybody be blessed. I'm just going to drop a couple of links down below before we take off. If you want to roll us out, if you have any music you want to roll us out to, by all means.
Oh no, I did. I just came to be a part of the collaboration, man, and getting change, and I just wanted to be. I want to be a part of
Throughout the
change.
information, the Leon Block Network too, and those guys, because even though I know that me and them don't necessarily see eye to eye on some of the stuff, but
Right.
I support independent people.
Right. And I'm getting to, more of that as well as just supporting the people and not the agenda. Because some of us are independent and we have different routes of getting to that goal line. It doesn't mean that we dislike the person or we're not listening to them or we don't talk to them. We just don't agree on our paths. And that's not claiming that they're bogus or anything like that, but so you already know it's the Urban Conservative, and I'm going to leave it at this. Have a happy weekend, and win or fail, freedom or jail, heaven or hell. Wish me well, and y'all have a great one.
You guys take care. Be blessed. I'm just going to real quick put up the information for the B-sides on the Zeno app. And then you guys take care and have a wonderful, wonderful day.